Maria had been a nurse for over 2 decades, but no one had ever really noticed her. She gave, she cared, she healed, without asking for anything in return. Every day she watched over the homeless, the forgotten, the ones society had cast aside. But one day everything changed. A knock on her door, a mysterious visitor, and the promise of a life-altering offer would unravel a secret that would change her world forever. Who was this man, and what did he want from her? Maria had no idea, but she would soon learn the truth. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems. If you want to hear the full story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for the shocking twist that will change everything. Maria had spent over 2 decades working as a nurse, giving her heart and soul to her patients, the ones most people didn't want to deal with. Homeless, sick, abandoned. These were the people who came to her, the ones who needed her the most. She'd been doing this for years, living in the same small town where she knew the faces of the homeless as well as she knew the faces of the children she cared for. They all had stories, stories that were untold, stories that faded into the background of her busy days. She didn't expect recognition, she didn't expect anyone to notice her, but that didn't mean she didn't want it. There were days, quiet days when the clinic was empty, when Maria thought about the way people treated her, just another nurse, just another caregiver. In the eyes of most, she was invisible. She was just doing her job, just being Maria, the kind-hearted woman who helped the less fortunate. But that day everything changed. It started like any other. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, casting a soft glow over the small house Maria called home. It wasn't much, just a modest 2-bedroom house tucked away in a corner of town, but it was hers. She had lived here alone for the past few years, ever since her last relationship had ended. It wasn't a sad ending, not really. She'd learned to live alone, to cherish her solitude. It was better this way. Maria had just finished breakfast when she heard the knock at the door. It was strange, she wasn't expecting anyone. She stood up, walked toward the door, and opened it. Standing there on the other side was a man in a suit, holding a briefcase. His appearance immediately struck her as out of place. This wasn't the kind of person who visited the neighborhood where Maria lived. He looked like someone from another world, the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone else feel smaller by comparison. "Can I help you?" Maria asked, her voice cautious but polite. The man studied her for a moment, his eyes flickering over her worn clothes and the modest surroundings of her home. "Are you Maria Johnson?" he asked, his tone businesslike but strangely cold. "I am," she answered. "And you are?" "I'm James Whitaker," he said. "I'm here to speak on behalf of my mother." "She's heard a lot about you." Maria raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "About me?" "Yes," James said, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "She's heard about the work you do, helping the homeless, the sick. People others turn away." Maria felt her heart skip a beat. She had helped countless people, but no one had ever come to her like this before. No one had ever tried to offer her something in return for her kindness. "I don't know what you've heard," Maria replied, taking a small step back, "but I don't do this for rewards. I do it because it's the right thing to do." James nodded as if he expected this response. "Of course. But my mother wants to thank you. She's in a position to offer you something, a way for you to continue your work in a bigger way." Maria's instincts immediately went on high alert. She didn't need anything from anyone. She was fine. She had always been fine, but something about the way he spoke made her uneasy. This wasn't just a thank you. There was something else behind his words, something that didn't sit right. "What exactly is it that your mother wants to offer me?" Maria asked, her voice steady but cautious. James hesitated, then opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He handed it to her, and as she took it, she saw that the folder was filled with names. Names of people Maria had helped over the years, people she had given her time, her care, her heart. The names were written neatly, methodically, and as she scanned the list, something struck her as strange. It wasn't just a list of patients. It was a list of people from all walks of life, people who had fallen through the cracks, people who had no other place to turn. "Your mother wants to do something special for you, Maria," James said, his voice now taking on a more calculated tone. "She has the resources to provide the kind of funding you need to expand your work, to build something bigger, something more sustainable." Maria felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She was no fool. This wasn't just about helping her. There was something more here, something she couldn't put her finger on. She had been in the business of healing for too long to believe in fairy tales. She knew that people didn't just give money and resources without expecting something in return. But what did they want from her? "I don't need money," she said firmly, placing the folder back into his hands. "I've built everything I have with my own 2 hands. I don't need your help." James's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. "Of course. But my mother isn't just offering money. She's offering you something far more valuable. She's offering you a way to make a difference on a larger scale. You could help more people, Maria. Think of what you could do with the resources she's offering. Maria shook her head. I help people because it's what I believe in, not because of what I can get in return. James didn't seem bothered by her rejection. Instead, his demeanor grew more serious. You don't understand, Maria, he said softly. This is a one-time offer. You can't just walk away from it. There's too much at stake. My mother is a powerful woman. She can help you in ways you can't even imagine. But if you refuse her offer now, there may be no second chance. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. The unease she had been feeling earlier was now a deep, gnawing fear. There was more to this than James was letting on. And suddenly she realized that her quiet, humble life was about to collide with something much darker, something far beyond the small town where she had spent her days healing. But she wasn't about to let fear dictate her choices. She wasn't about to let someone like James Whittaker or his mother control her future. I'm sorry, Maria said, stepping back. I'm not interested. James's eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile remained fixed. Very well, he said, turning to leave. But think about it, think long and hard. You may regret this decision. Maria closed the door behind him, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but the entire interaction had felt off. What had she just walked away from? What did James Whittaker and his mother want from her? And more importantly, why had they targeted her in the first place? As she sat down at her kitchen table, Maria couldn't shake the thought that her life had just taken a turn she couldn't reverse. She didn't know it yet, but the knock at her door was just the beginning of something far more dangerous. The world she had always known was about to be shattered, and the choices she made now would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone she cared about. Maria couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her chest. The feeling lingered long after James Whittaker had left, his words echoing in her mind. Think long and hard. You may regret this decision. He had spoken with such calm authority, as if he knew something she didn't, something that made her heart race with both fear and anger. It wasn't just the money or the offer that unsettled her. It was the way James had looked at her, the way he spoke like he was offering her a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Her mind kept circling back to the folder he had given her. The names, the faces, the lives of the people she had helped, all written down so methodically, so detached. It wasn't a list of patients. It was a list of people to be controlled, people to be used for someone else's gain. But why? Why her? What was it about her work that had caught the attention of someone like James Whittaker and his powerful mother? Maria couldn't let it go. She had to find answers. So, after another restless night of pacing the floors, she decided to go to the one place she knew she could get the answers she needed, the clinic where she volunteered. It was small, tucked away in a corner of town, but it was where she had built her reputation. It was where she had met all the people whose names were now sitting in a folder in her home. She had to talk to someone who could help her make sense of what was happening. As she arrived at the clinic, Maria felt a strange sense of dread wash over her. The building, though familiar, seemed foreign to her now. The walls that had once comforted her, the rooms she had once healed in, now felt oppressive. The weight of everything that had transpired was too much to ignore. Maria, a voice called out from behind her. She turned to see one of the clinic's social workers, Tanya, waving at her with a bright smile. Tanya had been working at the clinic for years, and the two had become friends over time. She was one of the few people who understood the depth of Maria's commitment to her work. Hey, Tanya, Maria replied, trying to mask the turmoil in her voice. I need to talk to you about something. Something. Strange, Tanya's expression immediately softened, sensing the unease in Maria's tone. Of course, come in, you look like you could use a cup of coffee. They went into the small break room, and Maria sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she took a seat. Tanya made them both coffee, her face filled with concern as she sat across from Maria. What's going on, Maria? Tanya asked, her voice low, as if she already knew that something was off. Maria hesitated for a moment before pulling the folder out of her bag and placing it on the table. Tanya glanced down at it, her eyes widening as she recognized the names. What is this? Tanya asked, her voice suddenly serious. Maria took a deep breath. It's a list of people I've helped over the years, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know how or why, but someone from outside this town has gotten a hold of this. A man named James Whittaker came to my door yesterday, offering me something in exchange for, I don't know what, but his mother is apparently a powerful woman, and they've been watching me. Tanya's face darkened as she listened, her eyes flicking between the folder and Maria. Maria, you're right to be worried. This is bad. I've heard rumors about people like that. They don't just help people, they exploit them. They use them, you've seen it yourself, haven't you? People like James Whittaker don't give things away out of kindness. Maria nodded slowly. I knew it. It felt wrong from the moment he spoke, but I don't understand why they're interested in me. Why me of all people? I've just been trying to help those in need. It's all I've ever done. Tanya leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Maria, you're not just some nurse, you're more than that. You've built something here, you've made a real difference. You've been helping people the system has ignored, people who have been forgotten, and people like James Whittaker. People like his mother, they don't like that. They see what you're doing and they want to control it. They want to take it from you, twist it, use it for their own gain. Maria's mind raced as Tanya's words sank in. But how? How do they think they can control me? I'm just one person. Tanya's eyes darkened. Because they have the power to make you disappear, Maria. People like them, they don't just control money and resources. They control the narrative. They control the people who have power. And if you're standing in their way, if you're out here making a difference in the lives of people they don't care about, you become a problem. Maria swallowed hard, the weight of Tanya's words sinking in like a stone in her stomach. She had always known that there were systems in place that worked against people like her, people who fought for justice, for the voiceless. But hearing Tanya's words, the blunt reality of what could happen if she didn't stop James Whittaker's mother felt like a punch to the gut. What do I do? Maria whispered, the fear evident in her voice. How do I fight back? Tanya sat back, her eyes narrowed in thought. You can't fight them alone, Maria. You need to expose them for what they are. You need to make sure the people who can help you, people who can fight for what's right, see what's going on. Maria's heart raced. She had spent her whole life trying to help people, trying to heal others. But this wasn't just about healing anymore. This was about survival. This was about standing up to a system that wanted to crush everything she had worked for. She left the clinic that day feeling different, changed. The fight ahead of her was no longer just a matter of helping the homeless or the sick. It was bigger than that. It was about exposing the truth, about shining a light on the darkness that had been hiding in plain sight for so long. Maria knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, but it was a road she had to walk, for herself, for the people she cared about, for everyone who had ever been silenced by a system that didn't care about them. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She wasn't just a small-town woman trying to make a difference. She was now part of something bigger, a movement, a fight against the powerful forces that had been controlling lives for far too long. But Maria also knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going down without a fight, not this time. Maria's resolve only grew stronger as the days passed. The unsettling feeling she had when James Whittaker knocked on her door wasn't fading. In fact, it was becoming more pronounced. She had made the right choice to walk away from his offer, but the path ahead wasn't going to be easy. Tanya's words echoed in her mind, "You can't fight them alone." And she knew it was true. She couldn't. Not when the powers they were up against were so much bigger than anything she had ever imagined. The thought of going public, exposing James and his mother, filled her with both fear and determination. What if she was wrong? What if they weren't the monsters Tanya had made them out to be? But deep down, Maria knew she couldn't live with the uncertainty. She had spent her life fighting for those who had been overlooked, people who were denied their basic rights and humanity. She wasn't going to back down now. The first step was to find allies, people who could stand with her, who could help her expose the truth. She knew she couldn't take on the Whittakers alone. So Maria reached out to a few trusted individuals. Tanya, of course, who had already proved herself to be a loyal friend, but also other people in the community, doctors, social workers, and advocates who had seen firsthand the corruption that often existed behind closed doors. She knew the town had its share of secrets, but she also knew that there were people who cared, people who wouldn't let the truth stay buried. A few days later, Maria sat down with her allies in a small community center, a place where people came for resources but often left with little more than empty promises. It was one of the few places in town where the poorest of the poor could find some semblance of care, and Maria had been here countless times. Today, it was different. Today, she was going to fight for more than just food or medicine. She was going to fight for her life and for the people who needed her the most. "I've been thinking about everything we talked about," Maria began, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Tanya's right. We can't take this on alone. We need to expose what's really going on, what James Whittaker and his mother are trying to do." Tanya was the first to speak, her voice calm but firm. "Maria's right. We've seen these kinds of things happen before. The people in power, those who think they can buy anything, they prey on the ones who can't fight back. But we can stop them. We have to stop them." Maria looked around the room at the faces of the people who had gathered to help her. They were all familiar. Some were doctors she had worked with in the clinic. Others were activists who fought tirelessly for the homeless and disenfranchised. There was James, a local social worker who had seen firsthand the devastating effects of the corrupt systems in place. They were all in this together, united by one common goal: to take down the system that had been exploiting people like them for far too long. "We can't just sit around and hope things will change," Maria said, her voice growing more resolute. The truth needs to come out. We need to show the town and the world what these people are really like. We need to let them know they can't hide behind their money and their power anymore." The group nodded, the determination in their eyes clear. James, the social worker, spoke up. "We can start by gathering evidence. We've seen how they operate, how they manipulate the system. It won't be easy, but we have to find the right channels to expose them." Maria's mind raced. She knew this wasn't going to be a quick fix. It wasn't going to be a simple matter of making a few phone calls and hoping for the best. The Whitakers were powerful, and they weren't going to go down without a fight. But Maria wasn't backing down. She had seen too much, helped too many people to let this pass by. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Over the next few days, Maria and her allies worked tirelessly. They gathered documents, met with people who had information, and slowly pieced together the connections that James and his mother had with local businesses, politicians, and even law enforcement. The deeper they dug, the more they realized how far-reaching the Whitakers' influence was. They controlled everything: healthcare, housing, even the local food supply. They had their hands in nearly every facet of the community. But the more they uncovered, the more Maria realized just how dangerous this fight was. It wasn't just about exposing one family's corruption. It was about exposing an entire system that had been built to keep people like her and her patients oppressed. It was about standing up to the wealthy elite who thought they could control the lives of those who had no power. As Maria sat alone one evening, going over the evidence they had gathered, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something told her to answer. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. "Maria Johnson?" a voice asked, cold and unfamiliar. "This is James Whitaker." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him since he left her house. What did he want now? "Maria," James continued, "I gave you a chance. I tried to offer you a way out of all this, but you didn't listen. You think you can take me on, but you don't understand what you're up against." Maria's pulse quickened. "I don't need your help, James. I'm done with you and your mother. I'm exposing everything you've done. The truth is coming out whether you like it or not." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When James finally spoke again, his voice was colder than before. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Maria. You have no idea what kind of power we have. If you continue down this path, if you keep digging into things that don't concern you, you'll regret it." Maria felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going to be intimidated. Not now, not after everything she had fought for. "You can't scare me, James. I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not backing down." There was another long pause, and then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, James said, "You will be." The line went dead. Maria stared at the phone for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been prepared for this. She knew the Whitakers weren't going to let her expose them without a fight, but hearing James's threat so plainly, it shook her. She had never been more certain of what was at stake. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every person who had ever been crushed by the system, every life that had been ruined by the people who thought they could control it all. But she wasn't going to back down. Maria had never been one to give up, and she wasn't about to start now. The fight had just begun. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Maria and her allies continued their work, gathering more evidence, contacting the press, reaching out to anyone who could help them take down the Whitakers. They knew it was only a matter of time before the Whitakers would try to silence them. But they had no choice. The truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. Maria sat in her small house late one night, going over the final pieces of the puzzle, when there was another knock on the door. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but she knew deep down that this knock, like all the others, was the beginning of something much bigger. She opened the door and found herself face to face with someone who could change everything. Maria opened the door cautiously, unsure of who she was about to face. The air outside had turned cool, the evening sky streaked with the remnants of daylight. But the person standing on her doorstep was not who she expected. It wasn't James Whitaker or anyone from his family. Instead, standing before her was someone she hadn't seen in years. Detective Lisa Grant, a local law enforcement officer Maria had known from her earlier days volunteering. "Maria," Lisa said, her voice tight with urgency, "I need to talk to you. It's about James Whitaker." Maria felt her stomach lurch at the mention of his name. The detective's expression was grave, and for a moment Maria could only stare at her, wondering what new twist had brought her here. Was Lisa here to warn her? Had the Whitakers already taken action against her? "Come inside," Maria said, stepping back to let Lisa into the house. She led her to the living room, her heart hammering in her chest. "What's going on?" Lisa sat down, her eyes scanning the room before she finally spoke. "I've been investigating James and his family for months now. I'm sure you already know there's something wrong with them. But what you don't know is how far they're willing to go to keep their secrets hidden." Maria listened intently, every word from Lisa confirming the suspicions she'd carried for days. She had known that James and his mother were dangerous, but hearing it from Lisa, someone Maria had always respected, made it all the more real. I've been trying to get enough evidence to take them down, Lisa continued, her voice tight with frustration. But it's difficult. Their influence runs deep in this town. They've got connections everywhere. And anyone who's tried to go against them, well, they've vanished. Maria's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean vanished? Lisa leaned in, lowering her voice. People who have tried to speak out against them or have even come close to exposing them, those people don't get the chance to tell their story. It's like they're erased. It's not just about money or power, Maria. It's about control. They control the narrative and they don't want anyone interfering with that. Maria's mind raced. Everything Lisa was saying lined up with what she had already suspected. The Whitakers didn't just want to stay hidden, they wanted to be untouchable. No one could get in their way, no one could threaten their reign. And now Maria was one of the people they saw as a threat. We've been gathering evidence, Maria said, her voice trembling but firm. We have enough to expose them. We've been working on it for weeks. Lisa shook her head. You don't understand, Maria. You can't just expose them like that. If you do, they'll make sure you regret it. They've been watching you. They know who you are, what you've been doing. They've got people in every corner of this town, and they'll use that power to silence you. Maria felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had known the risks. She had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing it from someone who had seen firsthand how the Whitakers operated made everything so much more real. You have to stop, Lisa said, her voice breaking. You're playing with fire, Maria. They'll destroy you if you keep going down this path. Maria looked at Lisa, the words heavy in the air between them. She understood the risks. She understood what it meant to go against someone with that kind of power. But she also understood that staying silent, letting them continue to harm people, wasn't an option. The truth had to come out. No, Maria said, shaking her head. I won't stop. I can't stop. I've spent my life helping people who have been forgotten, ignored, treated as less than human. I can't let that go now, not when I know what they've been doing to people. Lisa's eyes softened, but her expression remained serious. Maria, you're stronger than you know, but don't think you can do this alone. If you go up against them, you need to be ready for the consequences. Maria nodded. She had already made the decision. She wasn't turning back. She would expose them no matter what it took. She would fight for the people who had no one else to turn to. She wasn't going to let the Whitakers keep hurting people just because they had money and power. I have people who will stand with me, Maria said. I'm not alone in this. And neither are the people who have suffered under their control. Lisa looked at her, uncertainty and admiration flickering in her eyes. You're brave, Maria, but remember, bravery doesn't always mean you win. Sometimes it means standing up even when you know the odds are against you. Maria stood up, feeling a fire ignite inside her. She had spent her entire life fighting for others, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She wasn't going to stop now. The Whitakers had underestimated her, and they had underestimated the people who would stand with her. I don't care about the odds, Maria said. What matters is that I fight for what's right, and I won't stop until the truth comes out. Lisa didn't say anything more, but Maria could see the understanding in her eyes. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. Maria knew what she had to do. Over the next few weeks, Maria and her allies intensified their efforts. They reached out to journalists, tried to make contact with other individuals who had been hurt by the Whitakers, and gathered every shred of evidence they could find. It wasn't easy. They faced resistance at every turn from people who were too afraid to speak out to local officials who were in the Whitakers' pocket. But Maria was relentless. She knew that exposing the truth was the only way to break the cycle of exploitation and control that had held this town in its grip for so long. And then, the day came. The truth, everything Maria had uncovered, everything she had fought for, was out. The Whitakers were exposed. The stories of manipulation, corruption, and exploitation were broadcasted for the world to see. It wasn't just about one family. It was about a system of inequality that had lasted far too long. The Whitakers tried to fight back, of course. They had the power, the money, and the influence to retaliate. But in the end, it didn't matter. The truth had already been set free. And with it, the people who had been silenced for so long began to find their voices again. Maria's life was never the same after that. She had taken on a system of power that had seemed invincible, and she had won. The fight had been long, and the scars it left would never fully heal, but Maria knew she had done what was right. She had fought for the people who had no one else to stand for them, and in the end, that was all that mattered. As she stood before a crowd of people who had once been ignored, who had once been left to suffer, Maria knew that her work was far from over. But it was a beginning of something greater. A beginning of a movement that wouldn't stop until the systems of power were no longer allowed to control and silence the voices of the vulnerable. The fight was far from over. But Maria had already proven one thing: change was possible. And it started with people like her.